My name is Louise Connolly. I'm the events manager at Macmillan, and I'm delighted to welcome you all, to those of you who are joining us live in the webinar, and also to those teachers who are watching this webinar via Facebook. So thank you for joining us. So now I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Elspeth Pollock. Hi, Elspeth. How are you?
Fine.
Thank you for joining us. Again, it's with great pleasure I welcome Elspeth. We've been working together as well for many years, and it's a real pleasure. Elspeth is a teacher down south. She's an excellent teacher trainer. She's given teacher training sessions all over the country, and she has a very practical approach to teacher training, just like Usoa. And as she's in the class, she can share her experiences with us. So over to you. Her session is Talk to Me. Who said that?
Hi, thank you, Louise. Yes, I'm just going to share my screen here to get the session up. I'm here in Seville. I'm a teacher trainer and materials writer. And I wanted to know, first of all, about you. So the first thing we have then immediately into it is, what is your current teaching situation? This is a poll. Are you teaching hybrid? Are you teaching face-to-face with social distancing? Or are you teaching online classes? Yeah.
Okay.
So there's the poll. Let's see. This is really interesting, seeing what everybody's doing.
I know, and we've got people from all over, and we've actually got some people, Elspeth, from other countries. We've got somebody from the Netherlands and India.
Yep.
And I might have visited, yeah.
It's late at night there as well.
10:30 at night. Yeah. Wow. Okay, so it seems like a majority, 78% face-to-face classes with masks, yeah, and social distancing. There's about 20% with hybrid classes, and a very small 2%, yes, with online classes.
Very interesting that, yes, very few actually doing online classes. Thank you very much for that. Yes. The reason then that I chose to do speaking today with everybody is I feel that I've been teaching hybrid, I've been teaching online, and I've been teaching face-to-face with the social distancing. And I think speaking is the skill that perhaps has suffered the most, particularly if you have large groups. Speaking is never easy with larger groups of students, but also I think that my classes have felt a little bit joyless, and the speaking hasn't been as much a part of it. I have lots of goals to get to, and perhaps speaking has been the skill that's been lost a little by the wayside, because most of the time I can't hear what the students are saying. So that was the reason for choosing to look at speaking today. And the reasons also will be, I want to look at some easy, practical speaking activities that can be incorporated into lessons, that can be adapted to the different contexts. Obviously, we know now that most people are teaching face-to-face, but there will be some people who are hybrid. And so perhaps these activities can be easily adapted to different contexts, that foster a little bit of more communication in our classes without taking away from the more perhaps heavy goals of the course that we need to get to in Bachillerato and ESO classes. And finally, that are very practical and don't require much planning and preparation, because I do know that it takes a long time these days. It feels like it just takes a lot longer to plan our lessons. Yeah. So what will be happening there is, I don't know what's happening in my lessons, because I can't see my students, and because we've got masks on, they can't hear me, and I can't see who's speaking. I'm going, who said that, to the right at the back of the room, and I don't know who's talking, and it is difficult. So first of all, the visual clue of the the thumbs up there always helps in lessons. That's one thing. But then also my students have these cards prepared. We prepare them at the beginning of the year, and I've started to use this as a visual clue to what's going on. So when my students are doing speaking practice and I see the ones at the back and I don't know whether they're talking about what they should be talking about or whether they're talking about what they did yesterday in Spanish, what I've got there is the cards, and they say what's on the card, but they also hold it up to each other because it is so difficult to be able to know what your partner is saying. So the typical, shall I go first, or would you like to start, or shall I? And can you speak up? Giving them those tools to ask each other for better communication. Similarly, a visual clue that I use is that they have 3 cards each. So if my students are doing a speaking activity in the class, they put one of these cards in whenever they've made a significant contribution. It can't just be yes or no, it has to be a sentence. And they put one of these down. And so this really helps me so I can see what's going on in the classroom. Because I don't know if they've finished or they haven't finished, or who's speaking more, who's speaking less. If you don't want to do that 1, 2, 3 idea, just holding up a card when it's their turn to speak also gives you an idea of perhaps those shyer students who aren't saying anything that day, and who normally, if you could see their mouths, you would know whether they were participating, but you can't at the moment with social distancing. Similarly, mine all have a card that says, we've finished, so that I can see the early finishers, who's getting through it quickly, and I can be on top of what's going on in the classroom so that I don't lose some of them because they're getting a bit bored. So those are the visual clues that I use. Also, I plan my classes on PowerPoint. You might use Google Slides, as I said. And what I find is sometimes my students don't do the speaking activity particularly well because they don't actually know what they have to do because they haven't heard me. So I just include the instructions. That's about the easiest thing that I can do is, here you are, this is what you have to do. Speak in English, it's this page for 2 minutes, please, everybody. And that, although it sounds very, very simple, it does keep them on target. And similarly, I don't tell my students now what page we're going to do in the course book. This is a page from Prospects 2, because they can't hear what I'm saying. So I just say to them on the slide that I've prepared, what page is it? First person to find it has to say the page. I go, okay, thanks. And then they tell everybody else in the classroom, what page, and they do it. I don't have to take part in that. And then we would move on to, in this case, the speaking practice activity of the class, which is there are 3 pictures. This is actually about music, and they have to have a discussion about describing the pictures and then what they think they're going to be reading about in the lesson. So another thing that I like to do, I find that I feel as if a little bit of the joy has gone out of my lessons at the moment, and I try to and also because our students can't physically move as much, they're a bit deflated, they're a bit, so I like to do, I call it surprise speaking or a speaking brain break. These are short, unpredictable moments of speaking in my class. So instead of trying to incorporate speaking into the theme of the lesson, which I also do, but I also try and, if we can't jump, like so I was saying, lean from one side to the other in the classroom, we do a speaking brain break. So for example, in my lesson plan on Google Slides or PowerPoint, suddenly when my students are doing a grammar exercise, up pops a question. What's you doing after class? And they stop what they're doing and they talk to each other. This gives them a nice break and they just answer the question. And then whenever they are finished, they carry on with what they were doing before. It could be this. Could be this one, or it could be this. So this is one thing that I'd like to know now. What's the last series you saw on Netflix? I think I need some recommendations. Do you have anything that you could share about the recommendations?
In the chat?
Anything in the chat?
I must admit, I don't even have Netflix.
No, terrible.
Actually, you know what? I've stopped watching online because I work online most of the day. So well, like most people, but oh, hang on, there are loads of ideas. My God, I'm going to have, you know what I'm going to do?
Start getting Netflix.
No, well, first of all, I'm going to copy all of these. I'm going to paste it into a document. I'll send it to you and I'll have a look, and maybe I will get Netflix.
Thank you.
Wow,
Smashing.
Lupin, The Crown.
Oh, The Crown, smashing. I've just finished watching Snowpiercer. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I've heard about that, but no, I haven't seen it.
All right. Well, so, but the idea, thank you so much for putting in all of those contributions. The idea is that you just give your students a little bit of a break from what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's with that. Also, it could be anything. It could be things which are green, things which are tiny, things which are in your bedroom. This obviously, when I was teaching hybrid, it was very relevant because most of my teenagers have got their computer in their bedroom. But if they're face to face, you can also remember about things in your bedroom, so it's still relevant and personal. Then that brings me on to the surprise use of phones in class. You might have a policy where you work in your school that as to whether phones are allowed or not. Personally, I think it's really useful if we can teach our teenage students, ESO and Bachillerato, to use the phones constructively for English in the classroom, because otherwise they're going to be trying to do things with them behind our backs anyway. But you can use their phones, the photos which are there. If you don't, or you're not allowed to use the photos, they can always upload them and share them, the ones that they're willing to, on Google Classroom with you, so that you can then include that in the classes. So for example, what I mean by this is, this year, one of my groups, 15-year-olds, are paranoidly in love with my cats. So the question, so I was questioned before about, are you a cat lover or a dog lover? I'm actually a dog lover, but I have 2 cats. So what is turned into a whole thing with my students, and every lesson that we have, I have to show them how Ozzy and Dexter are getting on. And it's also because certainly this year, it's taken me and my students much longer to develop a relationship, because they don't know how to read my face because they can't see it. And the fact that they can't see my face means that they don't know whether they can't quite gauge how I'm feeling. So developing that personal relationship through the photos has also helped, because I can tell them that this cat here on the balcony, Ozzy, he fell off, broke his leg, and now I have to have invisible netting. All of these things that are just nice to share with your students. Similarly, they laugh at me because I tell them about my boxing experiences and show them my new boxing gloves, which I'm very bad at, but I enjoy. And you can use the classic Zoom feature on their phones. So, and as I said again, they can send you the Zoom photo if you don't want to use or can't use phones in the classroom. So for example, there you are. What is that in a word? Louise, what do you think that is? This is a, right in the chat. Can you say, what do you think this is? It's a zoomed photo of something.
God, what could it be?
Anybody got an idea?
I was going to say, a paint roller.
Oh, right. Okay. No.
No. I'm just being inventive. I have no idea. Somebody says a bag, a purse, a handbag. Right. Is it? Yeah. Is a bag? Is it?
No. Shall I show you?
No. Hang on. A boot. No. Give people a chance. A boot.
Okay.
A boot. Some kind of case. A cover for your mobile phone.
Really? That's
basket. People are terribly inventive. Okay, let's see.
Shall I show you? It's a boot. So if you write boot, you were correct.
Brilliant.
It's a boot that I took a photograph of because in the Corte Inglés, a shop here, a department store, I wanted to buy them, but they were too expensive, so I didn't. But that kind of thing is it's nice to develop that relationship with your students, and the photos that they are willing to share as well also helps you get to know them. Similarly, I pick up 2 random objects. I've got one of them here now, and I put them in my lesson preparation, or I just physically hold them up in the class and say, right, random speaking activity, which is more useful? And they have a chat about that. There's no preparation involved, and it doesn't matter about the level either. They can do it at their own level, whether they are B1, B2, C1. For example, there's another question with 2 random objects. Or we can go into the course book. This involving students in choice is extremely important as well. So we look at 2 pages in the course book, and they can talk to each other about which looks the more interesting, but then you can develop that. You might think, for example, you can look at a page, close it, and then tell your partner what you just saw. Or you can look at the page and say, what do you think we're going to do today? Or which looks more interesting? And what activity do you not want to do? This is something that I have definitely been using quite a bit this year, and saying to students, this is the page that we're going to do of the course book today. What do you not want to do? It can be risky sometimes, because sometimes they look at that one and go, well, I don't want to do the whole reading, and that's all there is on the page. But it's nice to be able to give your students some choice and some input into what is happening in the lesson, using the visuals from the book. This is my favorite no preparation activity for speaking, for all levels and for everybody. All my students, they're in pairs. Student A opens the course book and describes a picture from the course book. Student B draws it, and then they compare the visual with the drawing, and then they swap roles. And so at any point in the class where my students look a bit down, a bit tired, we just jump in and we do that, and it immediately cheers them up and motivates them, especially as not very many of them are very artistic. So it's a good laugh. Also, what I've incorporated in my lessons this year is words of the day, or words of the day. For example, if I want to get my students to recycle the words that we were using in the previous lesson or the previous week, this is C1 level, I want my students to include sniff, sneeze, and cough in the speaking practice of the day. So I write these 3 words in the corner of my whiteboard. They're always there throughout the lesson, and students have to incorporate these words into the lesson. It could be words, once you've done that yourself, you can get your students to do it themselves. This is from student Alejandra's notebook, and she chose beckon and fidget. Again, this is C1 level up there for my Bachillerato, and she chose those words. Therefore, everybody has to try and include beckon and fidget into what they say today. So Louise, I think you've got about 20 minutes left to try and include beckon and fidget.
I better write them down.
Yes,
Or else I'll forget. Beckon and fidget.
Beckon and fidget, yeah, they're pretty difficult.
Well, not really. Can I fidget now?
cheat. Right, now you're left with beckon, and that's a more difficult one.
Okay.
You can use this straight from the course book as well. If you in this extract from Prospects 2, you've got 4 that are highlighted in blue, and you can just recycle them the next lesson. I choose 2 of those 4 because it's quite difficult to use them naturally in speaking practice during the lesson, and then they have to try and include them. If you don't want to do words that you've chosen, or the student or the course book, you can go to this site is called Random Word Generator, and the good thing about it is it has a setting which is appropriate for under 18s, so not adults. And the word that, for example, came up when I just did this was me, and so students have to include the word me in the classroom during the class. We have rules to this. The rules are that you get 10 points if you say the word casually during the lesson, and then 5 if it's actually an active speaking practice activity. So that also encourages them to speak English throughout the lesson instead of just in those moments for speaking practice. So the next thing that we have here are sometimes, if you see that we ask our students to talk about very dry topics, perhaps using speaking activity to lead into a writing activity, and perhaps the writing is the main goal. We do a bit of speaking first. I give this to my students, and often with this question, this is the reaction I get. Don't know, I don't care. And I know it's for many reasons that someone who is 15, 16 would not want to share their opinions, maybe embarrassment, maybe shy, maybe some of a weaker level as well in the class, in a large group of students. Some are not going to be as confident. So to try and ensure that participation does happen, and they do have, they are able to talk about the topic. What I do is I put my students into groups of 3 or 4. And in this case, they have a mini whiteboard. We are cleaning hours in between uses. And one group prepares advantages, disadvantages, advantages, disadvantages across the room. And then when they've thought of the ideas, we put them up so that everyone can see them, either on the floor or at the front of the class. And that means that then we can have the discussion. Because what we've done is we've thought of the opinions first, and it doesn't make anyone feel embarrassed, or it doesn't make them the less confident students who don't know what to say. They've got the content there to share. This is another topic. I mean, sometimes we ask them the driest, horrible advantages and disadvantages of ready-made meals. So again, you can do it preparing it, and that allows everybody to participate more. If you don't have the mini whiteboards, if you can't use them, also I have, for some classes, depending on the number of students, laminated pieces of A4 with a board pen, and they can make their own mini whiteboards, which is extremely useful to be able to do that. Or they can just write it in their notebook and hold it up for everybody to see. Another thing that I do to try and again help those students who don't have the opinion to be able to speak in classes, or who feel a little unsure, is use, for example, a list of countries and what is your top country to visit, and then do a poll with my students, as also I was saying, and that allows me to then have a discussion. If, for example, Argentina is the most popular country for my students to visit, we then can base our discussion on why we think that. Why do most students say that Argentina is the most popular place to visit? And it just makes it a little bit easier and adds confidence to their speaking practice. So, for example, another topic which can be a little bit heavy would be this one. Yeah. And this is a poll which should come up now. And again, it can be quite difficult to give your opinion about this, but what do you think, if this comes up as a poll, what is the activity that helps the environment the most? Yeah?
I beckon you to speak.
That's very good. Sure,
I was waiting to say that, sorry.
Your chance. Is it,
I know, I'm just chancing. We have a poll. Yes, Gorka is going to put up the
there we
are.
Now.
Sorry.
So
which
if
activity?
You can just see what's the opinion here. Oh, that was so bad.
I know, that was naughty of me, wasn't it?
Okay. You did it. You get the 10 points.
Oh, go on. I think I do. No?
All right.
I think it's quite even, isn't it? It's quite similar, yeah. The thing is, it all depends probably on personal, one's own ideas and what one knows more about, I suppose. But yeah, we're more or less at a little bit ahead is cleaning beaches of plastic, 40%, followed by planting new trees, 35%, and paying people to recycle their rubbish.
And 25%. So I would use that poll as a basis, the results of the poll with my class as a basis for their discussion. And it changes the question a little bit, and it lets those who feel a little less secure know what others around them are thinking, so they perhaps feel less embarrassed when they're doing a speaking activity. So then obviously follow it up with, because we've got the content that we're going to talk about, follow it up with the expressions from the course books, the useful expressions that they have to learn to include to raise their level and to use in their speaking. Then Then another idea that I had about, which is actually the opposite of giving the getting students to create the content and building a conversation on that. It's reading aloud, which I think is very underrated, and I think we should all be doing more of in our class. It allows the students to focus their speaking on their pronunciation, on their intonation, without worrying about the content of what they're saying. They don't have to worry about the ideas, just focus on the pronunciation and the intonation. And for example, after my students have done a reading comprehension from the course book, then that's the moment in the next lesson to read it aloud to a partner. We can either do the reading aloud in pairs to each other, which the first time I do it with my students, they think it's a bit weird, but they actually get into it. It's a very nice way to feel fluent and to feel that you're doing well at speaking by reading aloud. If you don't want to do the in-class speaking, you can also set it for homework where they record themselves on their phones. It's free app on your phone. Students record themselves. And you can actually, I've tried doing that in class. It sometimes gets a bit noisy and it's not very possible, but it's possibly best done for homework. If you don't want to use a reading that they've worked on in class, there is actually a website, various websites that has reading aloud activities where your students can, for homework, read something aloud. There's a text here. Or a text here. It's the same as doing a text from the course book, but if they wanted to choose a different text, for example, you could allow them to choose one from here. They read aloud and they record themselves. And then we get to the stage that's interesting, the feedback. Now, I'm not suggesting that we play a recording of a student speaking, because I hate listening to myself speak. I think we all do. It's just embarrassing. I'm not suggesting we do that in front of a whole class, say, okay, here you have the recording. But you can play it to a partner. If you have it on a phone, you can play it to a partner, or if you're doing it live in class, you can read aloud to a partner. So it's not embarrassing. And then what you can do with that after, for example, I've played you my recording in class, or I've read aloud to you, you can do something which is confess the mistakes. So if you have recorded yourself, you can listen and confess your mistakes to a partner, or your partner can tell you what mistakes you made and you can confess that, yes, you did do those. You can also do a very interesting activity, very useful, is take your recording and transcribe it. And transcribe it in the classroom or for homework. I advise not doing the whole thing because it can be a bit long to transcribe, perhaps the first paragraph, and then compare that with the original text. Very interesting to see how what you're saying and try and transcribe it and then do that comparison. You can also, certainly here in Spain, in the south, we do go, the students are and you can listen to that and then try and replace your with which is perhaps a little bit more English sounding, the instead of the And also you could do a speaking practice feedback your partner. I find that my students are actually very generous with the feedback that they give to each other, which is lovely. And in these times, I think it bolsters the ego and makes them feel better. So you can, for example, in this case, fluency while reading aloud is very relevant, and your partner can tell you how well you did on that. One of the main things that we have to do in class, which is B1, B2 level particularly, and going into Bachillerato, story writing, narratives. And often these are writing, evidently story writing, but we do a speaking activity to prepare ourselves for that. So I thought of an idea. What I do to try and involve and personalize my students in the storytelling is set them some homework, which is to represent a story in 4 pictures, no more. As you can see, there's a story. I won't go into what it is. It was very complicated. It took a while to understand, but that's one of the ones that my students did. And then you tell the story to your partner, or tell your partner what happened, or you swap pictures with a classmate and then invent what happened and then tell it to your partner who drew the pictures and compare that story. I think the idea of using drawings that students have produced involves them in it, and because some students do not enjoy narrative writing or telling stories at all and find it very hard. So if you give them the opportunity to prepare visually at home, that helps. And then we move on into the writing practice, and they have to use the narrative tenses correctly, and we use the book as a reference for that. And finally, what we do is a moment of madness. I choose, my students are allowed to bring in an image, any image that they choose. If there are 8 students, if there are sort of 20 students in the class, then 8 of them, I include the image there. And we have to build a story using each of the objects. And it has to be one story using all of the objects in the last 3 minutes of class, which they really enjoy doing, because they can see, oh yeah, that I chose the phone, I chose the pear, and they put them in, and they have to invent a story from that. Yeah. And so then they can give each other some feedback on that as well, see how well you did on the activity there of telling the story. Yeah. So basically, those are the ideas that I've had for trying to do some speaking and make speaking a bit more personable and enjoyable in classes. And perhaps I thought if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask at this point about anything.
Yes,
yeah.
Well, there is a question in the chat. Somebody is asking, do students need to use all the pictures in the story?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
That's what makes it impossible.
Exactly. That's the challenge, no?
Yes, and that's what makes it fun. They do enjoy doing that, and particularly when it is the pictures that they have chosen, because you can't, if you have 25 in a class, you can't choose all 20, make one story with 25 pictures.
No,
so we just choose a certain amount each
a certain
time.
number
Yes.
of pictures from the total number.
Yes, otherwise we'd go a bit mad.
Yeah. And somebody else is asking, how do you create the pictures?
Well, just I do it different ways. Either on Google Classroom, my students can send me the picture that they want to be used, or they just tell me in class what they want a picture of. I find it, and in the preparation of my lesson, I just put one up there.
Right. Okay. And somebody else is asking, how do you get students to recycle the expressions, vocabulary, and speaking activities? Well, presumably,
because if you have the expressions in the book,
exactly.
Very often what I think I must be a very visual learner. What I do is I prepare classroom posters. I take from the course book, and we do the useful expressions, and my students then tell me which ones they find most useful, and we put them on a big piece of card, and we put those on the wall. So every time we do the speaking practice, they go to the wall and they go, right. Okay,
so they have a visual reference, and it's a way to remind them, no, so that they
absolutely. And another way to do that would be they go to the page in the course book that has the useful phrases, and they tick the ones that they want to use that day.
Oh, that's a good idea, because earlier you showed the course book pages of useful language, so you would ask them to go there and
which ones are you going to use today?
And choose a certain number, obviously
not
just
3 or 4.
3 or 4, exactly. That's a very nice idea. Maria is saying you can also give the students an object, a character, a place at the beginning and at the end, a terrible event, a happy one, and they will have to speak about, so there are different ways of adapting.
I think the thing is allowing students to give their what they want to put into the class. So it's their object, it's their word, and allowing them to do that is very motivating. Exactly.
So giving them some kind of choice, is always important. Yes. Okay, any other questions? No comments? And people are saying thanks, by the way. Thanks very much for the ideas. All of the ideas, a couple of people commented on the usefulness of the pronunciation as well, they're speaking out loud to work on pronunciation. So yes, I think that there's a lot of ideas here that people can take away and certainly apply quite easily to their
very
classes.
little preparation. I think that's
Exactly.
important, because class preparation is taking a long time at the moment.
It's taking a very much longer now, isn't it? Yeah. And I liked also your comments about trying to lift people's spirits and engage students with each other and create a sense of empathy, because I think if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of Usoa's talk, there was a comment about, I didn't get around to referring to it, but there was a comment about, you know, students at the moment being kind of like lacking in energy, and the sense that the empathetic, deflated. Yeah, they're deflated, the empathetic element has been affected, hasn't it?
And the relationship with the teacher is more difficult to build.
Exactly.
When your face covered, and yes, it's deflated. I'm working on bringing joy back to the classroom at the moment. That's
that's great.
That latest
yes.
thing. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yes, I also wanted to say, look, thank you so much.